I am Seraphine Vale, 38, the uncredited founder of a luxury resort group. To my husband Adrian, I am simply his quiet wife. Our marriage has settled into a polished hush that looks like peace from the outside but feels like distance within. The first hairline crack appears in small, ordinary ways. His new passwords, a perfume I don't wear, a weekend in Zurich no one can verify. I choose not to confront but to observe. By nightfall, I understand that stillness can be a symptom, not a cure. People say the sign of a good marriage is silence, the kind that feels like a warm room after a long day, the kind where two lives breathe in the same rhythm. For years I believed that. I curated quiet like a gallery piece. The white linen, the soft lamp, the crystal glass, the gentle ritual of folding shirts and placing cufflinks where he would reach for them without thinking. I thought devotion was an invisible thread. I thought, if you loved someone well, you didn't need to speak it every hour. My name is Seraphine Vale. Some people know my voice only when it greets them through polished front desks and ocean-facing lobbies. Others know my signature on contracts they are not allowed to photocopy. Very few know that I built the Street Marlowe collection from the ground-up shell companies, holding trusts and a fortress of NDAs that keep my name off glossy lists. At home, I am simply Sarah, a woman who remembers the dry clean ticket and never forgets the pills in the travel case. Adrian is what the papers call successful. CFO suits. Donor walls with his surname etched in brass. A way of entering rooms that suggests the room has been waiting. When he lifts his chin to kiss my hair in passing, it feels practiced, almost ceremonial, like he's clocking a requirement met. I do not begrudge the choreography. We wrote it together, once upon a more hopeful time. If my story reminded you of your own strength hidden in silence, stay a while. Subscribe to Voices of Sister Seraphine to hear more journeys of women who dared to step out of the shadows and return to themselves. The first change is not dramatic. It is the way his laugh thins on the phone, how he steps into the hallway to finish a call that used to end at our kitchen island. It is the faint trace of citrus amber on his collar, not my fragrance, not his aftershave, lingering the way a stranger's voice does in a remembered dream. It is a new lock screen on his phone, an alpine wallpaper, clean and empty, with numbers that are not our anniversary. Zurich, he says, almost absent-mindedly, spooning soup he doesn't taste. Weekend meetings. Bankers can only do Saturdays, apparently. He smiles without looking up. It sounds reasonable. Reasonable things are easy to swallow. I nod and retrieve his garment bag. The fabric whispers over my wrist as I place the navy suit inside and tuck the blood pressure medication into the side pocket. This is our ritual, my hands making order, his life moving on rails as if nothing derails. I iron the shirt a second time, though it doesn't need it. I tell myself the act is love, not denial. Crescendo Y, the first jolt. It arrives as an email that should not have reached me, an auto-forward from his assistant who forgot to update a rule after a software patch. The subject line is routine, antiseptic, weekend itinerary, confirmed. In the attachments, I see a flight to New York to Zurich then. In a second file, a black car pickup confirmation, not at Cloten Airport but at Street Marlowe Royale, oceanfront entrance. The driver's plaque will read, Mr. Vale. The suite requested is one I know intimately, the West Wing penthouse that catches dawn like a chalice. Zurich meets the sea. A banker's weekend learns a coastline. I close my laptop gently, as if any sudden movement could redraw the truth. The house is quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the world beyond our windows. I listen to the quiet like a stethoscope pressed to a ribcage. The rhythm falters, something inside flutters and then goes still. I do not call him. I do not forward the email back with a question mark. Instead, I walk the perimeter of our home the way a night manager makes rounds, counting what is where, what has shifted. A tie I did not buy. A second toothbrush that appeared last month for travel days. The way our bed's edge holds his shape only until 4 a.m., the hour when some men remember who they are and others remember who they wish to be. That evening, he is unusually affectionate, as if kindness were a receipt he needs to staple to the day. He kisses my temple and thanks me for the perfectly packed case. You're the best, he says, and the compliment lands like a paper napkin, soft, disposable, easily torn. I smile because I was taught to smile. Love can be teaching, and love can be theater. I am learning which one we are performing tonight. Crescendo 2, the quiet decision. After he falls asleep, I take the garment bag from the closet and check every pocket, not for proof but for clarity. I find a valet stub from a downtown restaurant we do not frequent, and a room service slip for 2 breakfasts printed on heavy cream paper, embossed with initials that are not mine. None of it is conclusive. All of it is enough. I place everything back exactly as I found it. Control is not confrontation. Sometimes control is precision. I make a cup of tea and stand by the window. The city glows like a circuit board. Somewhere beyond these lights, a front desk I built trains a new clerk to say a guest's name like a promise. Somewhere beyond these lights, a suite I designed will be turned down with linen I approved and chocolates I chose. I think about the distance between building a world and being invited to live in it. In the morning, I drive him to the curb. He taps a message into his phone, half his attention already in a different time zone. "Be good," he says lightly, stepping out, and the phrase falls between us like a dropped coin, small, cold, telling. I watch the car pull away until the taillights dissolve into traffic. Then I breathe in, deep enough to touch the place where fear lives, and breathe out until only the outline remains. I do not chase the car. I dial a number that exists only on paper, an internal line at street. Marlowe Royale, that rings in a back office no guest will ever see. When the manager answers, her voice is steady, capable, the voice I trained her to have. I give no explanations. I simply say, "This is S. Vale. Keep the presidential suite on standard protocol. No changes. And please have the penthouse log discreetly available for my review." There is a pause, then a quiet, "Yes, ma'am." That is all. Not a confrontation. Not yet. A step, soft as a footfall on carpet, that nevertheless changes the direction of the room. They tell you trust is a house. I know better. Trust is a bridge built over a river you cannot see the bottom of. It holds until it doesn't, and then you learn how to swim, or you learn that you already could. I once believed that if love was strong enough, people would never change. Tonight, I learned that love can be strong and people can change anyway. And in the space between those truths, a woman can decide who she will be next. If you've ever mistaken silence for love, stay with me. You may recognize your own heartbeat in mine. Subscribe to follow the rest of this journey. Adrian's habits start to shift in quiet, imperceptible ways. New passwords, phone calls behind closed doors, and the unfamiliar perfume that clings to his collar. I do not confront him. Instead, I watch calmly, almost clinically, as if the life we shared were a distant film. One night, an accidental email from his assistant reveals a name that chills me. Street, Marlowe Royale Resort, a place I secretly own. I realize that the threads of deceit have been weaving themselves for a long time. What I feel is not rage, but the cold stillness of water before the storm breaks. People imagine betrayal arrives like thunder loud, sudden, impossible to ignore. But the truth is quieter. It seeps in like humidity through the walls, dampening everything it touches before anyone notices. At first, it was nothing. Adrian's phone lighting up during dinner, the brief glance downward, the way he'd smile faintly and excuse himself with a wordless apology. He used to keep his phone on the counter while he showered, music playing from its speaker. Now it followed him everywhere, tucked in his palm like a secret he couldn't set down. Then came the passwords. "Security," he said once, laughing it off. "Everyone's tightening things up these days." His laugh was too quick, the kind that vanishes before it reaches the eyes. I told myself it was fine. I told myself that after 15 years of marriage, trust should not depend on passcodes. Still, I began to notice the scent. Not mine, not his. A faint trace of something floral and expensive neroli, jasmine, maybe amber. I recognized it not from department stores, but from the lobby boutiques of luxury hotels. I didn't confront him. There's a dignity in restraint. Instead, I observed him the way I once observed potential investors. Quietly, without tipping my hand. There's a peculiar loneliness in watching someone you love become a stranger in familiar clothing. At night, as he worked late in his study, I sat in the dim light of our bedroom, listening to the faint rhythm of the keys on his laptop. It sounded like a code, one I no longer knew how to read. Crescendo I, the clue. The truth arrived in the simplest way. An email not meant for me. His assistant, meticulous, overworked, had copied me by mistake. The subject line, "Weekend Logistics, Confidential." I opened it without suspicion, and there it was, plain as daylight. Reservation confirmed. St. Malo Royale Resort, Presidential Suite. Guest, Mr. Adrian Vale. For a moment, the words didn't register. I read them twice, then a third time. Street Marlowe Royale. My resort, my design. My creation, hidden under a parent company that only 3 people in the world knew I owned. I stared at the screen. There was no Zurich meeting. There was only my husband, booking the most exclusive suite in a property that carried my invisible fingerprints. I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. A sharp, cutting quiet that sliced through every illusion I had left. Crescendo 2. The realization. I replayed every small oddity in my mind. His sudden generosity with compliments, the renewed gym routine, the absences explained by client dinners. The pieces fit too neatly now, like a puzzle that had been waiting for this final corner. That night, as I folded his shirts for the trip, I pressed my face against the linen and inhaled. Beneath the clean scent of starch was something faintly foreign. A woman's perfume, or perhaps a story I didn't belong in anymore. I folded each shirt perfectly, aligning every seam. It was not an act of love anymore. It was ritual, closure disguised as care. When he came in to say goodnight, I smiled, a small, polite curve of lips. "Don't forget your medication," I reminded him. My voice was steady. My heartbeat was not. He kissed my forehead and said, "You always take care of everything, Sarah." Then he left the room, humming softly to himself, unaware that every note sounded like an echo of something already broken. Later, I sat by the window, the city lights blurred by the reflection of my own face. I thought about the irony that he was heading toward a place I had built to protect others' privacy, and yet it would expose him completely. There's a certain poetry in irony. There's also justice. I did not cry. I did not curse. I only whispered to the night, "Sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones that think they're safe." And in the silence that followed, I realized I no longer feared losing him. What frightened me was how little of him I had left to lose. If you've ever felt the quiet ache of suspicion, but chose silence instead of war, stay with me. This story isn't about revenge, it's about awakening. Subscribe to Voices of Sister Seraphine to hear what happens next. The day Adrian leaves for his business trip, I help him pack as I always do, masking the tremor in my hands with practiced calm. Once his car disappears beyond the gate, I call the general manager of my resort with one quiet instruction. Prepare the presidential suite, but keep my presence off the record. Hours later, from the surveillance room, I watch him arrive hand in hand with a woman named Clara Hayes, radiant with the illusion of being loved. The front desk greets him with words that cut through me. "Yes, Mr. Vale, Mrs. Vale has already arrived." In that instant, 15 years of devotion collapse into silence deeper than grief. The morning he left, the sky was the color of milk, too pale, too calm. Adrian moved through the house in his usual rhythm, cufflinks, cologne, coffee, half finished. I watched him button his shirt, the same navy one I had pressed the night before. My hands knew the pattern. My heart did not. He smiled at me as he adjusted his tie. "You make everything easier," he said, the way one might thank a hotel staff member for good service. I smiled back, my face trained in composure. Love, I have learned, can sometimes look like obedience. When his car rolled down the driveway, I stood by the window until the sound of the engine dissolved into distance. Only then did I let my hands drop, heavy as if they belonged to someone else. Crescendo Y. The command that changes everything. I took a breath, picked up the phone, and dialed the private line to Street Marlowe Royale. The general manager, Evelyn, answered steady, professional, unaware of what she was about to become part of. "Mrs. Vale," she said, her tone respectful. "Prepare the presidential suite," I told her, "but don't log my name on the guest list. I'll arrive quietly." There was a pause, brief but sharp. She didn't ask questions. "Understood, ma'am." Within hours, I was in the surveillance office of my own resort, sitting behind tinted glass, surrounded by walls of silent screens. It smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. The air was cold, precise, detached, just as I needed to be. Then, at 4:07 p.m., the black sedan appeared. He stepped out first, Adrian, immaculate as always, his movements brisk, efficient, untroubled. Then came her, young, blonde laughter spilling like champagne bubbles, her hand resting on his arm. Clara Hayes. I had seen her once before, briefly, at his company's holiday gala. She'd been introduced as one of the analysts, her handshake warm, her eyes just a second too long on him. I had forgotten her name then. Now it branded itself into my chest. Crescendo 2. The confirmation. They walked together through the marble entrance, where Evelyn herself greeted them. The lobby shimmered under chandeliers I had chosen, the marble I had imported from Verona. The lilies I had specified should always be white. The symmetry of it all was cruel. "Good afternoon, Mr. Vale," Evelyn said, her professionalism immaculate. He smiled, the same charming curve of confidence that had once undone me. "Reservation for the presidential suite," he said, placing his black card on the counter. Adrian Vale. I could almost hear the echo of my own name following his. Evelyn smiled politely. "Of course, sir. We've been expecting you. Mrs. Vale has already arrived." For a heartbeat, the world stopped. He froze. The woman's fingers tightened around his arm, confusion flickering across her face. But the moment passed quickly. He laughed, a small, uncertain sound, assuming it was a clerical mistake. "Ah, there must be an error," he said lightly. "My wife isn't here." But she was. I sat watching, unseen, the owner of every wall surrounding him, every shadow cast by the soft golden light. The irony was exquisite, like glass breaking in slow motion. He signed the check-in form, oblivious to the cameras angled just right. Every detail of his betrayal played out in the house I had built, under my roof, on my terms. From the control room, the images shifted, their reflection in the elevator mirror, her hand brushing his chest, the door to the suite closing behind them. I didn't cry. The tears had already dried months ago, disguised as patience, mistaken for grace. Instead, I felt something sharper, cleaner, the kind of silence that comes when you finally stop pretending you don't know. I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who waited for him to come home, who believed that loyalty could outlast temptation. She died quietly in that control room, her ghost watching through the lens of a security feed. The new woman who sat there didn't mourn. She observed. She memorized. She planned. Love, I realized, isn't always lost in a fight. Sometimes it's surrendered in a whisper, left folded neatly at the edge of a hotel bed. That night, when I left the control room, the sea outside was black and still. The waves rose and fell like breathing steady, unbothered. The world continued, indifferent to human ruin. And for the first time, I felt it too. That cold, unflinching calm. I understood then trust doesn't shatter with sound. It dissolves in silence until you wake up surrounded by the pieces you refuse to see. If you've ever watched your world break quietly, without witnesses or screams, you'll understand this part of my story. Stay with me. What comes next is not revenge, but awakening. Subscribe to Voices of Sister Seraphine to continue the journey. That night, I didn't need to confront him with anger. Truth, when carried with calm, is far more destructive. Dressed in white, I entered the restaurant where Adrian and Clara dined, the air tightening around us like glass about to shatter. I didn't shout, didn't accuse. I only reminded him where he was and who owned it. With one sentence, the illusion of his control vanished. I walked away without triumph, only with the quiet knowing that some endings don't need sound to be final. The next evening I chose white, not for purity, but for clarity. White reflects everything. It hides nothing. I tied my hair in a sleek knot, the same way I used to before board meetings, back when men twice my age underestimated me and learned too late what stillness can do. My reflection stared back from the mirror, calm, unflinching, no longer the wife who waited for answers, but the woman who already had them. When I arrived at the restaurant, the soft hum of conversation died like a candle in wind. The Street Marlowe Royale's dining room gleamed under gold chandeliers. I had designed it myself, every line, every curve meant to exude quiet authority. How fitting, I thought, that this would be the stage. Across the room I saw him. Adrian. The man I'd once trusted with my heart and my name. He sat facing the panoramic window, a glass of wine in hand, his laughter low and careless. Opposite him sat Clara Young, flushed, her fingers brushing his wrist in practiced affection. I walked toward them slowly. The click of my heels echoed against marble like a clock counting down to truth. When I stopped beside their table, Adrian looked up, startled. The color drained from his face, his lips parted, but no words came. "Adrian," I said softly, almost kindly. "You're sitting in my seat." The silence that followed was absolute. Clara froze, eyes darting between us, understanding dawning too late. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply leaned closer and said, "I believe you've forgotten something. The Street Marlowe Royale belongs to Vale Holdings, and Vale Holdings belongs to me." A single breath, a single truth. It was enough. His composure crumbled in real time, the subtle panic behind the eyes, the stiffness of someone who has lost control for the first time. The maitre d', recognizing me, straightened instantly. Staff around us fell silent, their movements slowing like the air itself had thickened. I turned slightly toward Clara, who sat pale and trembling, her hand still clutching the napkin in her lap. For a moment I felt a flicker of pity. She was young, naive, easily lured by power that was never his to give. But I had no words for her. My silence was mercy. Behind me, my attorney and the hotel's general manager had already begun their quiet choreography. Accounts frozen, access revoked, records printed and signed. Every step had been planned with the same precision I once used to build this empire. Adrian called my name once, low and desperate. I didn't turn. There was nothing left to answer. I left the restaurant the way I had entered, slow, composed, untouched by the noise behind me. Outside, the sea wind brushed against my face. For a long time I stood there, breathing it in. There was no satisfaction, no vindication, only the soft, inevitable peace that follows when you stop mistaking endurance for love. Some truths arrive like storms. Mine came like morning light, quiet, steady, irreversible. That night, I left without a word. The penthouse that once echoed with laughter now sounded hollow, stripped of warmth and meaning. I walked through its corridors like someone visiting a museum of my own past, touching walls that had heard every secret, every promise. The next morning, I sent the divorce papers with one letter, short and precise, then began rebuilding not just my empire, but myself. From loss came a quiet kind of freedom, and from silence, a new voice. The night air at the private runway was sharp and unkind. I boarded the plane alone, carrying no luggage except my handbag and the calm I had fought to earn. Through the small oval window, the city lights flickered like dying stars. When the engines roared, I didn't look back. There is a point in every ending where you stop needing explanations. I had reached mine. By the time I reached the city, dawn was breaking. The sky over Manhattan was bruised, purple and gold, the kind of sky that looks like both a wound and a promise. My car waited at the terminal, but I asked the driver to go slow. I wanted time to think before I faced what was left of home. The penthouse greeted me with its perfect silence. Every object was exactly where it had always been. Nothing broken, nothing out of place. Yet everything had changed. I walked down the hall, my hand brushing the walls. I remembered where his laughter used to echo, where I once stood barefoot, holding coffee and hope. The marble floor was still cold beneath my feet, but now it only reflected emptiness. Crescendo I, the letter. At dawn, I sat at the dining table, the same one where he used to discuss profit margins, as if they were poetry. The divorce papers lay in front of me, pristine and absolute. I signed them with the same hand that had once smoothed his tie before meetings. The ink didn't shake. Beside the papers, I placed a note, just one paragraph. "You always thought I was the keeper of your home, but this house, this world, it has always belonged to me. No anger, no blame, just truth." I sealed the envelope and sent it through my attorney. That was the last message he would ever receive from me. Crescendo 2. The reconstruction. The days that followed were strangely full. Without his shadow, time stretched wide and clear. I went to my office, my real office, hidden in plain sight behind subsidiaries and shell companies. The glass building rose like a monument to everything I had built quietly while the world thought I was simply someone's wife. The first meeting I called was with my executive team. We discussed restructuring Vail Holdings, expanding our resort chain into South America, and launching a new initiative for female leadership in hospitality. I wasn't running away from my past, I was reclaiming it. Every evening I returned home to silence, but it no longer frightened me. It was mine. In between boardrooms and strategy plans, I began something smaller, a foundation, not for charity, but for empowerment, a program to mentor young women who had been underestimated, dismissed, or silenced. We called it the Lighthouse Project. I spoke at small gatherings, sometimes to 50 people, sometimes to 5. I didn't tell them about betrayal or divorce. I told them about resilience, the art of starting again without apology. There is a peculiar strength in being broken and rebuilding yourself with the same hands that once held pain. One afternoon, after a meeting, I stood by the window of my office, looking down at the city, its ceaseless hum, its unforgiving beauty. I realized I no longer felt anger when I thought of him, only distance, and perhaps a quiet gratitude. Because without the collapse, I might never have known how capable I truly was. Now when people see me, they see composure, control, success. But what they don't see is the woman who learned that power isn't loud, it's steady. It's the calm voice that says, "I survived, and I built again." The penthouse is still there, though it feels more like a museum than a home. Some nights, I light a candle, let the flame reflect off the glass, and think of the woman I used to be, the one who waited for love to make her whole. She no longer exists, and that, I think, is the greatest freedom of all. When you stop waiting to be chosen, you realize you were the foundation all along. A year has passed since I walked away from the ruins of my marriage. Adrian lost everything: his company, his reputation, the empire he thought he owned. I, on the other hand, found something he never could: peace. Sitting on the balcony of my resort, watching the ocean breathe, I understand that forgiveness is not surrender, it's release. The storm is gone, and what remains is clarity, quiet, and a woman who finally came home to herself. It has been a year. The waves outside my window move in rhythm, patient and unbothered, as if the world has learned to exhale again. I sit on the balcony of the street, Marlowe Royale, the same place where everything once fell apart, and somehow where everything began again. The sea stretches endlessly before me, a blue so deep it feels like memory. I used to look at this horizon and see emptiness. Now I see space. Space for possibility, for peace, for breath. Adrian is gone from the world that once bowed to him. The newspapers whispered about his downfall for months: scandals, ethics violations, frozen accounts, boardroom betrayals. Eventually the noise faded. The world moved on. People always do. But I didn't celebrate his collapse. I didn't follow his name in the headlines. The truth is, the moment I left, he stopped existing in my story. His destruction was never my revenge. It was simply the natural consequence of arrogance left unchecked. Crescendo Y, the peace after the fire. The resort has changed since then. We renovated the West Wing, reopened under my name, this time the Vail Collection. My staff knows who I am now, not as a mystery owner, but as the woman who built this place with both hands and heart. Guests come and go, unaware of the ghosts this balcony once held. Every morning I walk the shore barefoot, letting the tide erase my footprints. It's become my quiet ritual, a reminder that we can start over every day, if we choose. Sometimes, I still think of the woman I was before the storm, the one who whispered gratitude while shrinking herself smaller and smaller inside her own life. I want to tell her, "You were never weak for loving. You were only mistaken about what love required of you." Now, I understand. Love isn't sacrifice, it's recognition. And the first person we must recognize is ourselves. Crescendo 2, the return to self. After the divorce, I spent months restructuring not just my business, but my rhythm. I traveled to branches I had never visited, met women managing resorts I had once only seen on paper. We spoke of leadership, balance, motherhood, solitude. Many of them confess they stayed silent in their marriages, in their workplaces, in their own minds, believing silence was strength. I told them what I had learned. Silence is only strength when it's chosen, not imposed. We laughed, we cried, and we built something new together, a network of women who would no longer apologize for being capable. Back at the resort, I began to write again. Small notes at first, scribbles on linen paper I kept in a journal. One morning, the words came like a tide. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is when the pain no longer owns the right to define me. Ivor So. I read those lines aloud to the empty room, and something inside me shifted like the last door of a long corridor finally opening. The past no longer clung to me. It existed, but it didn't imprison. It was simply part of the story, a necessary burn to clear the ground for growth. Now, in the evenings, I sit here with a cup of tea and listen to the ocean breathe. The salt air fills my lungs, the horizon glows gold before fading into indigo. Life feels smaller, simpler, but truer. I've stopped searching for justice. I've found peace instead. Adrian once told me, "You make everything easier." He was wrong. I don't make things easier anymore. I make them honest. I am no longer a reflection of someone else's ambition. I am my own beginning. The tide rushes in, foaming and fierce, then draws back in a whisper. Watching it, I realize my heart is the same. It breaks, it heals, it moves. I have burned, and I have risen. The ashes are no longer a grave. They're the soil where I began again. There was a time I thought love alone could hold a life together. Now, I know it isn't love that saves us, it's dignity. I loved him deeply. I believed in what we built, a home, a dream, a shared name carved into the glass of a high-rise life. But when the mirror cracked, I learned that even the most beautiful reflections can hide fractures beneath the surface. I walked away with nothing that could be measured, no apology, no closure yet. I carried everything that mattered, my peace, my voice, my worth. A year later, when I look at the ocean stretching wide before my resort, I understand some endings are not tragedies. They're invitations to return to yourself. There's comfort in knowing pain can soften. There's beauty in realizing that betrayal does not define you, your response to it does. And there's power in forgiveness, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Forgiveness is freedom. It's when you no longer let the wound speak louder than your will to live. When I look back, I no longer see ruins. I see foundations. Every tear I once hid built the woman I am now, calm, clear, and unafraid of silence. The light after rain feels different when you've survived the storm. It doesn't blind you. It warms you. To every woman listening, you are not defined by who walked away or who betrayed you. You are defined by the way you chose to rise quietly, gracefully, without letting bitterness stain your heart. The strongest women aren't the ones who fight the longest, but the ones who know when to let go. Let go not in defeat, but in wisdom. Because sometimes the most powerful act of love is leaving what no longer grows you. And so, as I close this chapter, I think of a morning cup of coffee still warm, steam curling upward like a small promise. The sky after rain always carries a gentler kind of light. That's what healing feels like, ordinary, soft, steady. If you're standing in your own storm tonight, remember this. The wind will pass, the sun will return, and you will rise again. Not the same, but stronger, clearer, freer. If my story touched a place in you, if it reminded you of your own quiet strength, subscribe, share, and let it travel to another woman who might need these words tonight. Because sometimes, awakening begins with hearing a voice that says, "You are not alone, and you are already enough."